Hello, good evening. Welcome to everyone. For joining us this masterclass workshop, which tonight is a collection of answers, best practice tips and trips to questions that you, our audience and watchers, have asked us about and sent in to us. So keep a lookout. Something that you sent in maybe there. As always, we're Astral Aviation Consulting, and we're working on behalf of the UK Civil Aviation Authority. Those of you who haven't met before, I'm Matt Lane. I'll be the host and kind of coordinating things through this evening. I'm a head of training and active single and multi FI and examiner and flight instructor course instructor. That's me. But I'm delighted to be joined by two my esteemed colleagues, Nigel Wilson and Charlotte Dadswell, which is great to have Charlotte joining us on the team as well. I'll let them say hello to themselves. So Nigel, if you'd like to say hello, introduce yourself.
Hi there. Yeah, Nigel Wilson, head of training at an ATO and a DTO. Fly all sorts of stuff from old warbirdy type things through to fast single aircraft doing IR right through from open cockpit to glass cockpit. And you might know me from Easy PPL. There you go.
Brilliant, thanks Nigel. Charlotte, over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Charlotte Dadswell. I've been flying for 20 years, instructing for 15. I'm a full-time instructor and head of training. I have a particular interest in vintage and tailwheel flying and having a Ronca Chief on our own farm strip.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, both. Over the course of this session, we'll break the workshop down into some easily digestible chunks, and we're going to cover some of the questions that have been sent in by you. Again, listen out for yours. We're also going to be putting some quiz questions in there, and that's on the theme of SCP revalidation myth busting. We had loads of questions all about SCP ratings and revalidating them and issues. So we thought we'd put those into some poll questions because everybody likes the polls and interaction. Just a reminder, we don't record who says what or who answers what or send the results anywhere. It's just a bit of fun to see, and it'll be a true false 10 questions, and we're going to intersperse those as we go through. So look out for those, and that will help cover the SCP revalidation myths and some truths that are in there. We'll also have a chance for any final Q&A. Please use the Q&A question box so we can coordinate those, and we'll try and get to as many of those as we can. It's great to see a whole bunch of people saying hello, where they're from. We can see people from all over the UK and even Europe as well joining us, which is great, especially on a real summer's evening. So hopefully most of you have avoided the pub and joined us instead, which is great. After the workshop tonight, we'd love you to stay in the loop with events and resources. Please sign up to our mailing list, and you can do this by going to our website, www.astralaviationconsulting.com, or Tal, who's supporting us on the tech tonight, we'll put a link in the chat box. And signing up also gives you the access to the replay of this workshop and a whole of safety resources. So some of the slides and some of the discussion you may want to rewatch and pause as we go through. As we kick off, I'd like to find out, those of you with us tonight, what aircraft type do you mainly fly? This gives you a chance to test out the poll functionality. Just as a reminder, if you're watching live, you'll be able to interact with the polls. If you're watching on demand, you won't be able to interact, but we will make sure we highlight the quiz answers as we go through. So please do try and test your knowledge as we go through. So here's the first poll that's up there. What type of aircraft do you mainly fly? We know loads of you fly loads of different things. We always get that feedback, which is great, but what do you mainly fly? And let's see what kind of spread we've got there. If we could have a look at the answers, please, Tal, that'd be great. So mainly SCP pistons, but great to see some of the glider and microlight community joining us, helicopters, multis, and as ever, a few of our gyro colleagues have joined as well, which is great to see you along. Thanks very much. So without further ado, we're going to get into some of the questions. The workshop is down for an hour tonight, so we'll try our best to keep on time with that and stick with that timing. So let's pick up some of the questions. Like I say, you may spot some of them. please, feel free to add your thoughts in the chat and answer any other questions or clarifications to the questions in the Q&A box. So the first one, this was sent in to us. Somebody, what should I do if I suddenly realise I'm infringing controlled airspace? Now, we have to say as well, if you haven't already seen it, we did a survey, and the survey results, this was one of the top 3 concerns of pilots that we deal with, was infringing controlled airspace. So from all of the returns and the information we got from everybody earlier this year, this was one of the top 3 concerns. So it's not a big surprise, but this is one of the questions. Nigel, over to yourself. What's best practice, Nigel? What do you recommend?
Okay, so I'm in the either fortunate or unfortunate position. You can take your pick. I do quite a lot of retraining for people who get sent to various instructors around the UK from the CAA to go and do some retraining once they have infringed. So I suppose really I could turn it on its head to say, what shouldn't you do to start with? So the number one thing is don't try to hide. So don't do a dirty dive and try to turn the transponder off, because you've already been logged on the system. Okay, we'll come back to that in a bit. There's the radar systems that NATs use. They have a bit of software sitting on top of them called CAIT, C-A-I-T, Controlled Airspace Infringement Tool. And that captures pretty much everything and highlights stuff to the controller, and there's a log, and I won't go into what else happens there. So anyway, back to the question, what do you do? So what you must do, make sure your transponder is turned on with altitude reporting. That's, if you should have it there anyway, but just double check that it is. Interestingly, stay at the current altitude, don't climb and don't descend, and also keep on your current heading. Okay, now obviously there's a caveat to that. If you're just on the edge of controlled airspace, it doesn't take much to get out of the way. But if you find yourself in the middle of it, then don't do anything silly. Just keep on the current heading, stay at the current altitude, and stay in a straight line. And then that's really so the controller doesn't have to second guess what your next move's going to be. Yeah, because they're already controlling aircraft to avoid you on your present track. Second thing really is, get in contact with the authority concerned. If you don't know who that is for the airspace you're in, then don't mess around. Just get on to 121.5, distress and diversion, and tell them your predicament, okay? And then do as you're told, basically, after that. So that's it in a nutshell. It's really quite simple. Don't hide. Transponder on out. If you're deeply inside, stick on your current altitude and heading, and then find someone to talk to. Okay, there we go.
Thanks, Nigel. Charlotte, any sage words to add to that?
Nothing to add, I don't think. Yep.
Great. The only thing I would add as well is, after you've sorted things out, okay, do not, you need to almost draw a line under it. Yeah. If you've had an infringement, you've got yourself out of it, you spoke to controller, draw a line under it. Yeah. All of the worrying about it, what comes next, all the rest of it, that's all for stuff on the ground. Yeah. If you've had an incident or you've had a mess up, draw a line under it and concentrate on a safe return to the airfield, a safe integration circuit, and a safe landing. Yeah. Because I have seen people have really nasty heavy landings or runway excursions because their mind has been so diverted or worried about something that happened in the flight as well. So it's easy to say, I know, but if it does happen to you, sort it out, draw a line under it, and then do the post-mortem in the club room or with your friends afterwards is one thing I'd add. So there we go. Great. So this one is for me. What's the minimum required cloud-based depart from an IFR flight and an SCP from an uncontrolled airfield? This is really topical because somebody sent this in to us, which was great. Thank you. But we had some debate about this in a couple of operating environments that I'm involved in as well. So what you need to remember is an uncontrolled airfield, even an ATZ such as Oxford, takes the classification of the airspace that it's in. So Oxford ATZ, for example, is in Class G airspace. It's a Class G airspace. It's still in the ATZ, but it's Class G airspace. So that's the applicable minima. So there has often confusion that the Class D CERA minima apply to departing from an ATZ or from an uncontrolled airfield. They don't. So really, there's no regulatory minima for an IR holder. Remember, for an IRR holder, an IMC holder, 1,500 meters flight visibility is applicable. But really, in terms of cloud-based and that, there is no minimum. It's down to the pilot's risk assessment. Nigel and Charlotte we discussed this. Certainly around at least 1,000 feet cloud base in the event of an engine failure situation is what's recommended in the flight examiner handbook, and I know a lot of CAA examiners will look to apply that. But Nigel, what are your thoughts? I mean, you do a lot of Cirrus IR flying from your lovely little strip in your part of the world.
I think that the key thing there, as you said, is risk assessment. So I know for a fact that certain or most IR examiners, when they operate from an uncontrolled airfield, they will want a minimum cloud base of 1,500 feet. The risk is, of course, is engine failure. Okay, you don't want to go into a cloud at 300 feet and have an engine failure at 800 feet, and then you're going to pop out the cloud at 300 feet and suddenly have to find somewhere to land, which just isn't going to happen. So with some aircraft, you might have another mitigation against that. So some aircraft have ballistic recovery systems, for example. So you might perhaps accept a lower cloud base in that respect, because if you have an engine failure in those aeroplanes, then the recommended procedure is to pull caps in a Cirrus, for example. You never ever try to do a forced landing unless you have a really good known hard long runway underneath you. So risk assessment is the key.
Thanks, Nigel. And like I say, it's very situation dependent. I did a test fairly recently, and we departed into a 700-foot cloud base in a single, and that was because we knew the layer was very, very thin. We would be on top at 1,500 feet. We also knew to the north of the airfield, literally just to the north, it was clear. So the exposure time was really very limited in that short climb and that short departure. So it's it's very situational dependent. Anything to add to that one, Charlotte? Or
I don't think so. Not being much of an instrument pilot myself, I'll leave it on to you two.
of course, in your vintage types, you're probably quite happy bimbling around at 500 to 700 feet at some of the speeds that you're at. And of course, the speed that you're operating at can be quite key as well. You know, something like a Cirrus or some of the more higher powered diamonds and things can be moving quite quick, whereas you might be floating around at what, 60, 70 knots potentially sometimes in some of yours.
Yeah, it gives you a bit more time to think.
Yeah, so there we go. Good. Right, this one is over to Charlotte to lead. We put a couple of questions together here, and this is talking about PPLs. How do they improve that? Basically, how do they push through the envelope? How do they expand their skills and experience without getting into difficulty? And how can they balance the risk of doing something new or unfamiliar against the benefits of stretching your skills? And we had these are a couple of questions we picked up, but we had a few along this line as well. What are your thoughts, Charlotte?
Yeah, definitely. Once you're qualified and you've done all the usual things of taking your friends and family flying and looking to stretch yourself a little bit, good advice would be to try one new thing at a time. So don't try and do it all at once. Don't overload yourself and expand your comfort zone bit by bit. Good way of thinking about it is how it felt when you were training, when your instructor was managing how much to stretch you and expand your skills. So just try and push it gently. It can be useful to discuss things or fly with an instructor or another experienced pilot to share the workload and for a bit of support. But it's really important if you're going to do that to plan carefully and decide who's going to be in command before you go. That needs to be nice and clear. It's also a good way if you're flying with other pilots to share the costs and have a bit of camaraderie. You can fly one way somewhere and swap over and somebody else fly back. It helps you gain some experience. Other side of that, of course, equally is don't allow yourself to be pressured into anything that you're not comfortable with just because you're with somebody who might have more experience, especially if you're on command. Don't be pushed, into anything that you're not happy with.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. And I echo that. I overheard two pilots in a club room not too long ago that they'd landed away. They were having a coffee and that, which was great, just as you described. But they were talking out on the way back that I think the one chap who wasn't flying on the way back had a IRR. The chap who was flying didn't, and I overheard them talking about, well, of course, if we get into cloud or we get in a mess or whatever, you can have control and use your rating and take us home and all the rest of it, which is, I mean, Nigel, have you ever come across these kind of cross-cockpit CRM situations?
Yeah, especially in group aircraft as well. That they're the ones that fall into the trap, so to speak. We've got a fairly experienced person or a relatively experienced person and a relatively new group member, so to speak. And as Charlotte said, something that the lesser group member, for want of a better word, can easily feel pressured into going on a flight that perhaps they might think twice themselves if they were by themselves, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, great. And of course, there is out there as well. If you can't find an instructor, there's the LAA coaching scheme, and I think the BMAA have similar. The gliding clubs have a lot of support for mentoring and instructing there similarly. And I think the LAA coaching scheme, Charlotte, I believe, is been revamped and relaunched. I think I saw as well. Actually, I haven't seen the details, but I think they're refreshing that as well. If those of you are permit flyers, I don't know if you know anything about that. So.
Yeah, there should be some more details out soon, I think. So keep your eyes peeled for that.
Brilliant, excellent. Right, so we've discussed 3 of your submissions. Here's time to get you all thinking. Again, so we've got a first question here. So if we can, all of these questions I will add are true and false. So there's not loads of tricky answers to go through. So if we can have this first quiz question up, please, Tal. So an instructor may refuse to sign a logbook after completion of the 1-hour dual flight training. Is that true or is it false? So we'll give people a few seconds to have a look. Let's have a look at the results, please. Ooh, quite a split there. Nigel, over to you to give the answer.
Yeah, quite a split. 71% say true and 29% say false. Well, I suppose the first really thing to say is, how many of you realise that your instructor is supposed to sign your logbook after you've done your 1 hour's flight dual training, specifically for the revalidation of the SEP? So that's the first thing. CAA have issued new guidance to instructors actually on this thing. If you read the legalese part of the document, part FCL, then technically once a pilot has managed to achieve their 12 hours, 12 takeoffs and landings, and their 1 hour deal with the instructor, then they can get revalidated by experience by one of the options is by the instructor who did that flight with them signing the license. And also, it also states that the instructor has to sign logbook too. The difficulty with instructing in that respect is what happens if the instructional flight that you did clearly shows the instructor that this person has actually gone quite a long way from the standard that we expect from a normal pilot. Okay, but historically there was no remit there for the instructor not to be able to sign it. But the CA have issued guidance, and they're now saying that actually they have said that now that the instructor may refuse to sign the logbook for the dual flight. Okay, until that person has undergone a little bit more training and reached a satisfactory standard. So instructors aren't examiners, but they have that option. That's the important thing. The reason the signature is really important is because if a pilot goes to an examiner and asks them to revalidate their license, their SAP rating based upon the fact they've done all of the prerequisite training, which includes that 1 hour with an instructor, it's now very clear from the CA that the examiner must see that the instructor has signed that flight off. Otherwise, there's not a lot of point in having this particular rule. In other words, the examiner has to be shown that the instructional flight was to a satisfactory standard. So that's it in a nutshell. Yes, they can refuse. When you do your dual flight with an instructor, then basically they should point it out to you that they will only sign it if a satisfactory and safe standard is met as part of the training that they would be doing with you. Okay, anything else by anyone else?
Thanks, Nigel. That's great. Quite a long answer, but that's because it's all changing. It's in the latest training com if you want to lead the details on that as well. I would just add as well, the cases where pilots are totally unsatisfactory are really few and far between. Most people occasionally need a bit of a brush up. I know even, you know, ourselves do. But there is that remit, but it's not a common thing, I would suggest. So don't worry about it, is my advice. So next question, please. The 1 hour duel must be done in the SEP class if someone is claiming reval by experience hours on 3-axis microlight for their SEP land rating. Is that true or false? So this is talking about the 1 hour refresher training flight that Nigel's just been talking about. So we know we can use 3-axis microlight if the pilot's got differences rating, but can the 1 hour duel be done? Let's have a look at what people thought were the answers to that one, please. Oh, again, quite a split again. Charlotte, I think you were going to answer this one for us.
Yep. We've got the right answer is it's true. So to revalidate the SEP rating, yes, as we said, you can count hours of experience on 3-axis microlights towards the hours requirements, but the refresher training hour needs to be done on SEP.
There we go. Thank you. And the third question, if we could have this up, please. So Lapper holder seas have only managed 11 3/4 hours in the past 2 years and only has 11 landings. They decide to go flying solo for the remaining 15 minutes to make the time before they take passengers. Is this legal, true or false? Give people a chance to read that question, see what you think. So they've figured out they haven't got the requisite recency, which is good, but they're going to decide to go flying solo for the remaining 15 minutes to make up the time. Is this legal? Let's have a look. What do people think? Oh, almost a split again. Actually, every single question's had almost a split in that as well, 60-40. The answer is false. They can fly solo, but it has to be done under the supervision of an instructor. So you can't just decide to go and do solo, a bit like making up the 3 takeoffs and landings for passenger carrying. That solo flying to get yourself back enough for recency has to be done under the supervision of an instructor for a lap, or you can't just elect to do it yourself. So if you're part of a club or group, or you know, with the right approvals and instructors, you can do that under supervision, but you need to seek that supervision. Great. Let's move on to a few more questions. Keep the time rolling. So this one is all about, do we use TODA or TORA, that's takeoff distance available or takeoff run available, for an airfield that's got no official data? Again, topical. Somebody was talking to me today about taking a PA-28 into a rather limiting strip that you can only take off in one direction and land in another direction. So it's quite interesting to experience their thought processes. But Charlotte, what do you think? You've got a strip. Is it actually in your house, or
It is,
where
yeah.
you base your? Yeah. So this is very topical for you, isn't it? So yeah.
Yeah, something I've given some thought to, definitely. So yeah, for your performance figures for your aircraft will usually enable you to determine your takeoff run required, which is the ground run to get yourself airborne, and your takeoff distance required, which will be your distance to reach a certain height, usually 50 feet. And remember to factor these appropriately for your conditions on the day and your surface, so you can work out what you need on the day. Licensed airfields will usually give you official declared distances for their takeoff run and takeoff distances available, which you can get in the AIP. For this specific case in question, we're looking at an airfield or a strip where just the actual usable surface length is known. So effectively a takeoff run available, but it would be safest to assume probably that your takeoff distance required, or to try and calculate and make sure that your takeoff distance required is going to be less than this. So you'd be reaching your 50 feet by the end of the strip. Unless you visited on the ground, to be absolutely sure there's no obstacles, that would make sure that you are going to have a safe margin over anything that might be at either end. And of course, the same applies for the case of landing runs. and distances. If there's obstacles on the approach, you're probably not going to be able to touch down at the very beginning of that measured distance. So you need to make sure you're still going to be able to get down and stopped. Talking about calculating figures, many vintage aircraft like my own don't have any official performance figures. So the advice here really is to get to know your aircraft, be really familiar with it, carry out some testing somewhere where you've got plenty of room to get a feel for the realistic performance that you're going to get from your aircraft and from yourself. Certainly was the case for me before I took our aircraft into our strip at home. So did lots of testing at Goodwood at different weights to figure out what it was going to do and how accurately I could land it before I took it in. Also worth remembering that even if you've got some official figures, they're produced under ideal conditions with a new aircraft. So it's worth making sure you've got a little bit of margin for an older aircraft and your ability to fly it with that degree of precision. There's also a lot of useful information to be had in the safety sense leaflets on weight, balance and performance, and the one on strip flying. It gives a lot more detail on this sort of thing.
Brill, thanks, Charlotte. And I think we will we'll send out the links to those with the emails that come out there as well. Like I said, some of those safety sense leaflets are really very good. But of course, you mentioned obstacles and things like that. Absolutely right. And of course, some of these strips, the growth of trees or obstacles around may be quite uncontrolled. And you might not know exactly what you're dealing with. And I think you're advised to visit and walk the strip on the ground if it's something you're going to be using regularly or getting involved with. I think that's really good advice on that as well. So thanks for that, Charlotte. We'll keep moving. So this was a really interesting question. This came up in a couple of fashions actually as well. So this is somebody asking the after start checklist for 152 PA28 about a mag check. And they've always assumed the checks, the mags are earthing, but they're seeing people doing it as a power mag check and checking the mag drop. Nigel, we had a discussion about this and it cropped up in a few cases. What are your thoughts on this?
It did. Okay, so specifically the after start check where you checked both the mags is to ensure that you indeed have got two mags that individually allow the aeroplane to run. So if it's very easy to start an engine with only one mag working, and you won't know that unless you actually test the individual mags. So what we're actually looking for on this particular test after start is a no stop condition, basically, that when you turn the switch to a particular mag, that the engine continues to run on both those settings. That's the first one. It's not correct to try to work out what the mag drop is. That's not what this function is, because first of all, we haven't got the correct RPM set, which would be at a much higher RPM to assess the performance of each magneto, and that's not what we're doing here. So just to move on from that, the actual mag check itself, when you're doing the engine run-up check, so that is really a performance check to make sure that each magneto is performing correctly. And that's where you're looking at the drops for each of the mag and also the difference between each of those magnetos to make sure that that's in limits too. The other check we do, which is sort of just worth mentioning here, which is quite interesting, is the check that you're supposed to do before you shut down. And again, this is done at low power setting. And now this one is what we're saying on the screen here. This is to check that with each click of the switch, basically, you see a mag drop, okay, to show that the P lead or the earthing lead connected to that switch is indeed working and earthing each of those individual magnetos, so that when you turn the mags off after the engine is shut down, you are pretty confident that both the magnetos are indeed earthed and that any movement of the propeller will not induce a spark and therefore have any chance of firing in a cylinder and any residual mixture that's in there to actually give the proper kick or even start the engine. The chat me and Matt were having about is that some POHs specifically require you to go to the off position, okay, while you're doing these mag checks just prior to shutdown. But it's really, really important that you follow the procedure in the POH. Cirrus do this, for example, and I know there's some other aircraft do too. But it has to be done at a really low power setting. Cirrus is done at idle. So just before shutdown, you check the left mag, right mag, then off briefly, and then back to both again to make sure the engine dies for a very short time before you put it back on both. If you do it at a higher power setting, all you're going to do is result in a massive backfire and possibly see your exhaust floating, over the field behind you. So with the resultant explosion that happens in the exhaust system. So just make sure you do it at the correct power setting according to the POH. So they're the 3 times you do the mag checks. Okay, and they've all got a different reason for doing it.
Brilliant, thanks, Nigel. Yeah, and it's very much a military thing as well. With military single engine piston do the off check, but as you say, the Lycoming procedure there is at 900 RPM, so it's kind of back at idle to do the off check prior to shutdown. Your advice with that is if you inadvertently go to off and you kind of fumble or whatever, don't then try and flick it back to on. If you end up getting stuck at off, just leave it at off, shut down properly, and restart in a controlled manner, because like, as you say, you risk quite a large bang across. You can be heard across the airfield. Trust me, I've done it and it's not pleasant. So there we go. Great. So this one, we've got a medical webinar coming up later. It's in, I can't remember exactly when it is. I think it's August or September, but we've got a webinar with an AME coming on because we've had lots of questions about medicals. People are really keen to speak to an AME as well. It's quite a difficult subject to cover because everybody's medical case and situation is often quite specific to them, and people want to discuss specifics which need to be done in medical confidence. But we can talk about some generics, and we will be doing that in that webinar. But here's the question that was sent to us. When one makes PMD, Pilot Medical Declaration, it's all about reasonably believing that you meet the medical requirements for a Group 1 DVLA license, not subject to a disqualifying medical condition. The person is asking, is this a condition that would disqualify a person from driving, or one that would disqualify a person from flying? So the answer is you are certifying in a PMD if you're doing the below 2000 kg, which is the most common one, that you meet the class 1 DVLA driving standards and you're not on psychiatric medication. That's the current system. And there is some quite good advice that takes you all through this on the CAA website as well. The CAA have launched and are doing a PMD review, but I don't expect they're probably going to remove the higher level of personal medical declaration, the up to 5,700, and just stick with the 2,000 and below, which aligns to the DVLA class 1 standards. Some people are just saying in the chat the guidance notes from the CA straightforward and process only took a couple of minutes. Yep, so a lot of people are doing this as well. And Tal's just reminded me, because I was waffling and trying to remember the date, but she's jumped in and saved me 30th of July for our medical webinar there as well. Thank you, Tal, on that as well. Nigel, Charlotte, do you see a lot of people starting to move to personal medical declarations? Is that something you're starting to see a lot of with private pilots?
Of a certain age, yes. Certainly, local club flying. When we always recommend that people make the PMD while they have got the class 2, and not then go for the renewal. Because if you end up doing a class 2 renewal and then getting it refused, you need to be very careful about them making a PMD. Some insurance companies don't like PMDs, so you'll find some clubs have a local rule as well, where you have to have a chat with someone like the head of training just to allay any fears that you've done the PMD for a very good reason, and not because you are trying to undermine the class 2 medical and the AME process.
And Charlotte, you see in your clubs as well that you deal with, I guess, pilots moving on to PMD?
Yeah, 1 or 2, yeah, starting to appear. Yeah, much the same as Nigel said.
Yeah, and I think the thing with a PMD is it's all about trust and integrity, isn't it? If you're feeling fit and healthy, exploit it. It's probably one of the most generous provisions in the world in terms of private flying, the PMD. It's an absolutely brilliant piece of work by the CAA, is my personal view. Really enabling. But they're placing a lot of trust in us as pilots to assess and be honest about our own health and conditions. I spoke to a private pilot today, actually, who has some concerns about their health, they're waiting for some tests from the GP. They're operating on a PMD, but they decided not to do any flying, or they might just fly with an instructor in a few weeks' time just to keep their hand in. But they've decided not to go flying while they're waiting for those to come back. So yeah, it's a really sensible, great way to tackle it as well. And Nicholas has just asked, can student PPLs get a PMD? So if you're going for microlight or gliding or the NPPL, if you could train for one of those, yes. But for a Part FCL license, no. You need a medical initially, and then you can only declare once you're actually a license holder. You want to check my lines on that, Nigel?
Yeah, no, absolutely right, Matt. The problem is that you cannot be a student and fly on a PMD on a Part 21 aircraft, which is what most of the flying organisations use to train on. So that's the big issue at the moment. And hopefully, who knows, in the licence revamp, which is coming up shortly, they might try to address that. But we'll wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the idea is if you have at least one Class 2 medical, you've at least had a sort of medical check over at least once in your flying career. And Rob's just asked, are there any restrictions with a PMD compared to a Class 2 medical? Again, Nigel, Charlotte, check my lines, but the main one is that well, you're restricted to LAPL privileges. So which doesn't really affect most people in terms of number of passengers and weight they can carry. But certainly you can't do there is nuance and edge cases, but you can do night, but you can't do instrument. You couldn't exercise the privileges of an IR restricted, for example, and you can't fly overseas with it as well. So it's pretty much GREG UK airspace. Nigel, I mean, there is lots of nuances that we've discussed privately as well, but that's the easiest way to think about it, I think, at the minute, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, but it's a great utility. I'd encourage people to make use of it if it suits your flying and your lifestyle. Right, next bank of 3 quiz questions. Let's have this one up, please, Sal. More SEP myth busting. SEP land rating must be revalidated by experience in the last 3 months of validity. True or false? What do people think? Let's have a look at the answers, please. Hopefully people have had a chance to have a look. Oh, bit more going for false this time. Charlotte, I think this was your one to answer. What's the answer?
Yeah, well done, most of you. False is correct. The 3 months comes from the revalidation by proficiency check. So if you want to keep your expiry date, you need to do the proficiency check within the final 3 months. But for revalidation by experience, that can be signed off any time in that second year, as soon as you've met all the requirements.
Absolutely, that's right. I signed somebody off to 2028 actually only last week because they'd already done all of the very active pilot. They'd already done all the requirements, so yeah, well ahead of time. Next one, please. Tell in the background. So the 1 hour dual, in the case of a LAPA holder, there's multiple instructor flights to make up the 1 hour dual, provided the completion of the that should be hour dual is within the previous 20, the regulations are complied with. So bit of a mouthful, but this is often what you will face with trying to figure out LAPL recency. I'll let people have a read and have a look at that. Is that true or false? Let's have a look at the answers for that one. What people plumped for? True. Nigel?
Okay, so maybe people have misunderstood the question a bit, but
Yeah.
a lot have gone for true. The requirement is that within the past 24 months, you must have a total of 1 hour dual instruction. So it's not just the final bit that makes up an hour dual. So you can't have 45 minutes, 2 and a bit years ago, and then the 15 minutes within the last 2 years. So all of that 1 hour dual total time must be within the 2 year period, previous 2 years from the date that you're about to go flying. So we'll leave that one there. I think that's fine.
Yeah, we weren't trying to trick people, but it's just to draw out that all of the flights have to be within, not just the not just the completion of the hour. So next one, question 6. LPC or proficiency check within the previous 20 months to date for LAPL holders replaces the need for the required experience for hours and landings. Is this true or false? I won't give people too long on this, just as we keep on time. Let's have a look at the answers then. Oh, pretty much an even split again here as well. The answer is that's true. Proficiency check is one of the options. We've got some guidance on SEP ratings and LAPL, the recency requirements that will be going out on the post quiz email as well. I've extracted those from the regulations just so you can have a look at those and figure it out yourself if you wish. Oh, right, back to your questions now. So, welcome change in licensing coming later this year, but will allow MPPL holders to have their flying hours. Should it be mandatory for MPPL students to hold a FRTOL? Now, the situation at the minute is that you cannot officially get a license issued without an FRTL. My advice would be just get, bite the bullet, get through the things and get it done. I know RT examiners can be difficult to get hold of, but it's really worth going. The FRTOL is valid for life now. You may have people out there that had time restrictions or requirement to renew FRTOLs, but they're all valid for life now in with the license. My view is just try and get it done and get it issued, especially because it will be issued for free along with your license issue. If we've got NPPLs or other variants of licenses out there that will be looking to transition as part of the licensing simplification to a combined license, that's again the time to get the FRTOL sorted there as well. Nigel, Charlotte, I don't know if you've got anything to add, or I mean, getting hold of RT examiners has been a bit tricky, I know.
Can be. I think the important thing there is that lots of people think, oh yeah, it's just an FRTOL, I don't really need one. Legally, you must have an FRTOL to operate the radio in the aircraft. So if you opt to get your license without an FRTOL, technically, when you go flying, you are not allowed to use the radio in the airplane. So it has got some fairly major implications. So just what Matt said, just bite the bullet, go through the training. There's plenty of people around who can help you with the training specifically for that exam, and just go and do it. Yeah.
Charlotte, any thoughts from a?
Yeah, exactly the same. Just get it done, and then you can use all the kit that you've got, and sometimes you might need some help. So good to be able to use it.
Brilliant. And William has made a comment as well about a language competency test. So yes, I know that can be a problem for some people where maybe English isn't their first language. They can only get a ELP level 4 or 5 and can't be certified by an examiner at 6. And I know some people have been quoted fairly large sums of money to get their ELP sorted as well. So I know that is a barrier and a problem. But hopefully, if you shop around, you can get somewhere that's got some fairly sensible pricing for language proficiencies. Nigel, I've had a few people to deal with where they haven't been able to achieve ELP 6. I don't know if you've had a couple. I know it can be a nose for them. So yeah, I recognise that.
And it can be quite difficult for an examiner to judge. So if there's any doubt, we tend to push them down the ELP route with an official certificate. You can go down the ELP and end up with a level 6. That's fine. But as someone has said on the chat, if you've got an ELP of less than 6, then that ELP has to be renewed every few years. Yeah.
Brilliant. Often I feel ashamed by some of the people that are struggling to get ELP level 6 when I consider my Midlands comprehensive school education going back down the day. So yeah. Here's an interesting one, Charlotte. LAPL holder doing a club currency check. Can these hours be classed towards the 10 hours needed after a LAPL to then carry a passenger? Any thoughts on that, Charlotte?
So this is talking about the requirement for a LAPL holder to have 10 hours of flight time as PIC after the issuance of their license before they can carry a passenger. So in this situation, if they haven't got the 10 hours, they can't carry a passenger. So if they're doing a club currency check with an instructor, the only way that can happen is if the instructor's in command. So the pilot being checked must therefore log it as PUT, and it wouldn't therefore count towards their 10 hours as pilot in command.
There we go. So there's quite a clear-cut answer. Thank you, Charlotte, on that one. Oh, a bit with a one for maybe some of the instrument pilots among us. And we had a couple of questions related to this, but we've kind of summarised it. On an instrument approach like an ILS, when shall I deploy landing flap? Nigel, what are your thoughts?
Okay, so I think we'll just distinguish here between approach flap, if you use it, and landing flap. So most people come, well, depending on the aeroplane, some aircraft come down an approach with an amount of flap down, which is set just before they intercept the glide slope. So they're already configured in an approach configuration. The general rule is, certainly from an instrument rating perspective, not quite so much on an IRR perspective, as you'll find out why in a second, is that once the aircraft reaches 500 feet above ground level, you should not change the configuration of the aeroplane for the landing. Okay, so for an IRR, because of the higher minimas there, it may well be that you will get to your minima and be visual with the runway above 500 feet above the ground, in which case, yes, you can then select the rest of the flap to use for landing. If you're on an IR approach or an IR pilot with an IR rating, then your minima is going to be much lower. Typically, you're on an ILS, 200 feet above the ground, effectively. So you would not then change the configuration of the aeroplane. You would land with the configuration you came down the approach with. Okay, so that's the general rule. Don't forget, ILS systems and landing systems, they generally have occur at airfields that have got quite long runways. So it's not like you're going to end up trying to do a short field landing off the end of an ILS. So it's not too much to worry about. But having said that, when you're considering the performance calculations, going back to what Charlotte talked about a bit earlier on, extending it to IR, then you do need to think about what the performance calculation is for landing with less than full flap in those situations.
Oh, thanks, Nigel. And I can testify as well that, often you get people trying to fly an ILS or approach with quite a bit of flap down back at like 70, 75 knots, kind of final approach speed. It's really difficult. The aircraft's not speed stable. You get quite a bit of drift effect, whereas the same aeroplane approaching with less flap at 90 knots can be a lot comfortable to fly an instrument approach on. So it is well worth, if you've been taught one way or you've flown one way, it's sometimes worth experiencing having a go at it another way as well. But obviously within maintaining the appropriate flap limitations and observing that as well. Right, so resident strip expert, it appears, has got another question. Somebody said, would you consider following a good tip for taking off from grass strips about if you've not achieved 2/3 of your takeoff speed in 1/3 of the distance, abandoned the takeoff? What do you think on this one, Charlotte?
Yeah, it's a good rule of thumb. It's what I teach. It's really helpful to choose a visual feature to mark that decision point as well. So you're not tempted to just keep pushing on, thinking that it's going to resolve itself if you haven't got that speed. So look for the 1/3 of the way along, pick a point. If you haven't got the speed by that point, then abort your takeoff. With regard to your landing or takeoff distance being the limiting factor, check the figures for the aircraft so you know the answer. As the questioner suggests, effective flaps and powerful brakes may well mean that you can theoretically land in less space than you need for takeoff, but it may mean it's also worth noting that actually achieving a landing within a certain distance is dependent on your ability to approach accurately at the right speed and land on a selected point, as much as what the POH says is required by the aircraft. So do practice your short field landings before considering visiting a strip where the margins are less than you're used to.
Brilliant. Thanks, Charlotte. And Nigel, anything to add to that?
No, it's all about knowing your aeroplane and knowing the strip. Yeah, so that's the key factor there. But if you don't know strip, then stick by the rule of thumb that Charlotte just said there. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks both. Oh, final block of quiz questions. We have this one up, please, Sal. The refresher training hour can be completed while flying overseas on a holiday with an instructor. So you go overseas, you'd like to do a bit of sightseeing. You think, oh, I'll use that for my hour with an instructor. Can you do that? True or false? Let people have a look. What do people think on this one then? Let's have a look at the results. Oh, it almost an even split. Everybody's going, every question is almost 50-50 today. So yeah, it's a slight trick question. We put false, but it could be true. So key thing here is, is the instructor licensed according to the same regime that you're operating under? So if you're a UK Part FCL license holder, that person also needs to have a UK Part FCL instructor certificate there as well. So for example, if you go over to America and do an hour's flight there, it may be an FAA only instructor and you wouldn't be able to count that as well. Equally, people in military or other systems as well that may be doing dual flying as well, you need to ensure the person actually has the right instructor certificate to complete and sign off the training hour under our regime. So it may be possible, but often it may be false. So slightly trick question. I apologise for that. Next one, please. Quiz question 8. An instructor with the privilege, FCL 945. Hopefully most of you have picked up that terminology. You can discuss it if not. May sign an SCP land class rating once the revalidation by experience requirements have been met. Let's have a look at what people think. So you've got an FCL 945 instructor. The experience requirements have been met. So our intrepid pilot has, done their hour instructor. They've now got the training hours and all the good stuff. So they go and find their local FCL 945 holding CRI in their group to sign off. Nigel, what's the answer here? Oh, sorry, let's have a look at the answers actually. What do people think first of all?
Let's see what you think first. Right.
Oh, true, 80%. False.
Okay.
Go on, Nigel. Then what's the answer?
All right. Okay, so this is an interesting one. So Part 945 is the bit that allows an instructor to sign your license to show that your SCP class rating has been extended for another 2 years. So the way that works is the regulation says, providing all other prerequisites have been met. Okay, so technically what that means is you have to have done all of the other flying first and then do the flight with the instructor, who then signs your logbook and then can sign your license. CAA have a little bit more lenient view on that, is that after you might do your flight with an instructor first, so to speak, and then do the 12 hours, and then you can go back to that instructor that done your flight and sign your license, and that is also okay with the CAA. Okay. If the other thing is that if you still need to make the hours up, and you do multiple flights with different instructors that make up your hour, then it becomes a little bit more of a grey area. Technically, it's only the one who completed your hours dual flying that can sign your license. Okay. The bottom line is, if you're not sure, just get an examiner to do it, because examiners can sign licenses whether we have flown with the person or not. We can just sign it in that respect. Just be careful. A word to instructors here, if we've got any instructors on the call, just be careful about what you're signing here and the forms that you're using. We're going to come on to that in a bit, but basically, if you come across a LAPL license holder, you should not be signing their license at all. In fact, even examiners don't sign a LAPL license holder's license, even after we've done an LPC with them. So no signature should ever be made on a LAPL license. Okay, if you're not sure about it, then I know Matt's got a couple of links that will go out to people at the end of the presentation, which has got a lot more information about this, but I'm not going to steal his thunder. So that's the answer to this question anyway.
Bill, okay. And the other topical piece of advice as well is if your license is full, so all those rating boxes are full, examiners and instructors, they're free to obtain from the CA. You can get the little insert pieces of paper that you can, continuation sheets that you can fill it in on, and they just slot in your license. There's those people that collect lots of ratings, and that may quite easily fill up their license, have to go onto continuation sheet as well. Don't do what I found on somebody's license the other day, is continue to start writing things in just any old random blank space all over the license. That wasn't great, and we had to speak to the CA, who said the license is now invalid, and the individual will have to pay for it to be reissued. So yeah, don't fall into that trap, and don't cut your license up. If anybody still out there cutting their license up, please don't. Next question. Once revalidation by experience complete, the pilot must complete form SRG 3108 to notify the CAA. We'll answer this one. We'll go through this fairly quickly, so we're getting towards the end of time. What are the answers for this one, please? Oh, another mix, Nigel, another split, almost a split again. Go on,
Yeah.
Nigel, quickly then. What's the answer there?
Bit of a misnomer, this one. There is a form called SRG 3108 on the CA website, and it's sort of it used to imply that you had to send it in. You don't. You only have to send it in if you want the CAA to be the person that signs your SCP rating up again by you providing the evidence. So you don't need to do that. Normally, the instructor or examiner will sign a separate form. It's usually something called an SRG 1157. That's the easiest one for instructors and examiners to use, and even though it's got the word examiner on it, yes, instructors can sign it in that way. The instructor examiner will send that to the CAA. They will then sign your license, and you as the license holder need to do nothing whatsoever. Okay, there you go.
And yeah, or the other alternative form, I think somebody mentioned in the chat, is an SRG 1107, which somewhat bizarrely is a course completion certificate. It's very odd but yes, you can use that one as well. I don't myself, because I find it slightly odd that the things are on a course completion certificate. So there as well.
The other one's 1119 that people tend to use, but that's a lot more involved and requires a lot more boxes and dates and things filling in. So it's much easier, very straightforward. 1157 is the way to go.
And somebody's just asked about if they're on a lap or medical, can they revalidate an IRR? Yes, you can, but you can't exercise the privilege of it. You don't actually need a medical at all to revalidate that rating, but you can't exercise the privileges of it until you regain the appropriate medical. But there's nothing stopping you actually revalidating or renewing it at all, even with it you have no medical at all. And quiz question 10. So pilot meeting all the requirements for revalidation by experience presents a logbook and license for rating extension 1 day after the rate. So they were on holiday. They got distracted. It's now the 1st of May. Their rating ended on the 30th of April, but they're whizzed down the flying club tomorrow on the 1st of May. Can they get the examiner to sign to extend the rating? What do people think? Final question. Let's see what we get on this one. Let's have a look at the answers, please. Oh, false, 83%. Yeah, we've got a bit of it. God, Charlotte, what's the answer?
Yeah, well done. Most of you, false is the case. Yeah, even if it's only 1 day over, the rating has expired, and everybody's renewing rather than revalidating, which will mean a proficiency check. The license has got to be signed before it expires. So the advice here, don't leave it to the last minute.
Yeah, we're all CFIs and heads of training here as well. And the one thing we can advise you from tonight's thing is don't leave it to the last minute, please. As soon as you've got the requirements, in that second 12 months, go and get it signed up. There's no point in waiting. Life gets in the way. People go on holiday, people forget. And the number of people I've had people drive hours, and I actually had a chap meet me in the ice. I was skating with my kids in Swindon at the ice rink, and he drove an hour and a half to meet me at an evening skating session to get his rating signed that evening because he was going to expire at midnight that night, and would have cost himself as a private owner, it would have cost himself a flight test with examiner and all the rest of it as well. So no skin off my nose. While I was having a coffee off the ice on my skates, I signed his license up for him. But this poor chap had a bit of a stressful drive, but luckily he got hold of me. But there we go. So there was a few extra questions there which we have covered. The safely flying back VFR on top. Would have liked to have covered that, but in view of time, we'll have to save that for another one. It's been great to have people's questions come in. Just going to flash these slides up very quickly in the last minute. That's the ratings page as well. If you're watching this on playback, pause that. There is 2 mistakes in that license. So if you want to watch this on pause back, there's 2 mistakes. Pause it, watch it, see if you can find the 2 mistakes in that ratings page and let us know on social media there as well. And somebody's just asked as well, how early could you get your license validated? As soon as you've met all the requirements in the second 12 months of validity. So as soon as you've met the requirements. There's another summary there of what we've been talking about, which you can pause and have a look at on playback. And that's the process that Nigel talks about with the 4 numbers for the SRGs. Remember, if you're a commercial pilot, you also need to do the update on the portal self-service there as well. Some of us have got commercial licenses. You need to do that because if you're an instructor examiner, you'll get the CA questioning you as to why your ratings are out of date when you've done tests and things like that if you haven't updated things as well. Any more questions, please? That's my Astral email address. Feel free to send them through. We might try and sweep this up in some socials or in some maybe a bonus session if we get loads of questions, because people do like being able to interact and ask with us on those as well. But all it leaves me to say is we hope you've been able to take something away from this evening. Thanks again, as ever, for all of your engagement there. Like I say, you'll get some resources that come out on the email at the end of the session. I'd like to say thanks so much for Nigel and Charlotte for joining and helping us out. It's great to have you both with us and bring your varied experiences. In fact, between the 3 of us, we're starting to cover most of the south of England, really. We need, later on, we've got, I think, Tom Castle's joining us for a webinar from the north of England. So that's good. And then we'll have to get somebody from Scotland as well. So we're not getting too south-centric. The next webinar is in June, and that's on weather. So we're great to have Darren from the CA and Simon Keeling back with us as well. And then Nigel, I think, is back with us. I think we're talking about display flying then, aren't we, in June,
yeah.
I think, Nigel?
Yeah, just display competition stuff. So that's the one Tom's going to be on from up north. So yeah, enjoy that one. And
Charlotte will be back with us helping out on the panels and with some of us in the future. So it'd be great to have us with us there. Brilliant. Thanks very much, everybody. Take care. Go and enjoy the weather. Fly safely. Plenty of water. Watch performance figures and all the good stuff if you're flying in this great weather. But do go and enjoy it and make the most of it. It's great to see it. But thank you and good night, everybody.
Night.
Right.